Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our study today. We are in the book of Judges, and hope you're enjoying this ride as we study the life of Samson. And we're going to just go through only a couple verses today because they are just very rich and very deep. And hopefully, it won't be too overwhelming, but that you'll see how wonderful this language of the Hebrew language that God has given us and preserved His Word in, and how deep you can go. So we're at verse 16, and again, this is Samson. He's in the arms of Delilah, and she is pressing him daily with her words and urging him so that his soul was vexed unto death. Again, being the Monday morning quarterback and looking at it from this viewpoint, you wonder what he was thinking. Why was he letting himself be verbally abused like this? We would call this, a very toxic relationship. His verbal abuse, everything should be giving warning signals of get out and get away and get out of this relationship because it's just not going to be good. Um, but in order to see what these words mean, she pressed him daily. She urged him so much that his soul was vexed unto death. Um, those words are just too enticing for us just to let them go. So we're going to take a look at in the Hebrew at Bible Hub. And again, this is a very easy program to use. I encourage everybody to just give it a try sometime, and you can't hurt anything or do anything wrong, but it will definitely give you some insight that you may not have um, gotten just from the English. So verse 16, um, I'll just read it so you can maybe get a little bit of flavor for it. Vayehi ki hetzikach lo bidvarecha. So when she pestered him, so let's look at this word pestered. So you click on the 6693 comes up, and the word is tsuk, and it says to constrain or to put into straits, kind of picturing someone who's going into a canyon, and the walls are getting narrower and narrower and narrower, and as he's being pushed into this, there's these high walls on either side, and it's bringing distress. So that's the image here of what is happening with Samson, that he is, you know, being being pressed here, and it's the word translated as being pestered. Again, we kind of get the feeling, of what's happening, but to think of someone being pushed little by little into a narrowing canyon um, gives us a better indication of what the Hebrew was meaning. And it says that they were her words, and notice that this is devar. So these are words from the heart. In Hebrew, there's two different ways to express your meaning of your words. Amar, which is more common everyday language, doesn't have a lot of richness and depth to it, or devar, which are words from the heart. And so she's really digging down deep and really using words that um, are getting to Samson because they are in the depths of her emotion. And it says, Hay Yamim, every day. And then we get to this next one, it has a number 509 to it, and it's called pressed him. We see that it's in a PL form, which is the most intense form that Hebrew has. Again, the difference between English and Hebrew is Hebrew has moods to it. Every word has a mood, has a feeling, has a nuance to it. They don't have tenses like English does, but again, similar idea. So the PL is the most intensive form. So when this word is here, and we see a PL, we know that this is really uh, getting to him emotionally. This is very hard, very intense, um, that she is pursuing him and pressing him. But we need to find out, what does this word pressed mean? So we click on this 509, up pops the concordance, and it has the word allots to it. And what's interesting here is this word is only used one time in the Bible, right here. only here, which again really piques your interest. Out of all the 7,500 words that are known to exist in classical or biblical Hebrew, why was this a special word? What was it trying to convey? And so that's the beauty of studying the Hebrew is we can go on a little bit of a word search. Now, there's also another new word I want to teach you that when a word in the Bible is used only one time, there's a word to describe that. And so that word is hapax legomenon. It's a Greek word. It just means said only once. And it's only really applied to if you're using classical Hebrew or if you're using classical Greek. But here, mostly used for biblical words that are only used one time. And again, it stands out to the translators because it makes the word difficult to understand. Of course, the biblical Hebrew is somewhat of a dead, lost language, and so the meanings of these words are difficult for the translators to wrap their mind around. Well, what was the original intent of this word? Normally, they look for other places where it's used in the Bible and try to get a sense for the context of where it's being used. When there's a hapax legomenon, it's very difficult because there's nowhere else to look. If we go to our Hebrew and Chaldean lexicon, circling where this word is used, it just says it's to urge, to press upon anyone. It's used more frequently in the Syriac or Zabian language, which were ancient languages of that time. So we're kind of stuck. How do we really know what this means? Well, the beauty of Hebrew is that every letter has a meaning to it. And it's been said, and there's a Hebrew teacher, his name is Chaim Ben Torah. You can look him up online. He is a Christian man um, who is a Hebrew scholar, and he has done a fantastic study on looking at the letters themselves and developing what he calls as a built-in commentary in the letters. And it helps us as we study to look at these letters and maybe the meaning is not very direct, not very clear in the lexicon, but we have an opportunity to dig a little deeper. And so on your screen, you're going to see the letters used in this word of, alats. And the first letter is an aleph, which you see here. And these letters can have one of three meanings. If this is being used in a, a way that's being very direct, where we know what's going on, and it's in a very positive way. The Aleph is a symbol of God, His unity, His headship. If it's somewhat in we're not quite sure what the mood of the situation is, that Aleph can represent these things of stillness, fire, oneness, repentance. But if it's in a negative fabric, if it's in a negative mood, if there's sinister things happening, if things are looking like danger is coming into the person's life, then it would be used in shadow format. I think we can get the picture. I think shadow is a very good understanding. And so this olive in a shadow format could be doctrine or theology that is an error, or someone whose ambivalence shows ambivalence towards God, meaning that he's not caring about God. He's not, caring about his circumstances. And of course, this fits excellent and perfectly with what Samson is going through. He's ambivalent towards what God is wants for him. He's ambivalent or doesn't care of what's going on. Clueless is probably a good modern word for it. So the middle letter of this word is a lamed. It's looks like an L, and so the shadow of this lamed in this word would be self-importance and very narrow thinking. Could be a workaholic, someone who's consumed with his occupation. Again, you can see how this fits what we've seen in Samson's life right now, thinking he's an island to himself, very important, not realizing where his strength is coming from. And maybe he knows it in a textbook type of way or in a totally educational type of way, but he's not living it. His thinking is narrow, that thinking that everything's all about him. And then finally, the last letter of this word is a sade, which has a sound like a TS sound. And the shadow of that is thinking that you're self-righteous and that your failure is going to discourage you. You're going to be down when things go wrong, when things don't go your way. Obviously, this fits perfectly in what's happening here with Samson and his downward path. So now you learned a word that's only used once in the Bible. Now, so we understand the pressing and the urging and pestering, but then it says his soul was vexed unto death. So, what does it mean to be vexed? And so let's take a look at this word 7114 and pops up to be katsar, and it just means to be shortened. So obviously, what we get from the context is that his life, his patience is being cut short, being trimmed off little by little. You'll see there's quite a bit of commentary here of describing the word. Um, Ex- Strong's exhaustive concordance says to be cut down, much discouraged, grieved. It's tied in with the agricultural term of being harvested. Again, remember at this time, Israel was very agricultural. They were not industrial, that had not come upon the scene. So everybody related more intuitively to things that had to do with farming and agriculture. So many, many words in the Hebrew have agricultural backdrops to them. And so this is the time of harvesting, of cutting the grass, cutting it down, cutting the grain, removing it, cutting it off from its source. And that gives us a better understanding as to what he was feeling, that little by little, he was just being trimmed, he was being cut away, all the veneer was being pulled apart, and he was being exposed, and it was causing his soul, which again in Hebrew, the word for soul is nephesh. Um, Another fascinating study is the parts of what we call is humanity of body, soul, and spirit and mind are different words in Hebrew and take on a fascinating study that I have not yet completed because it is very deep. But his soul, the breath that was breathed into him by God, which was his personality, is being cut short to where he feels it's going to cause him to die. And so, this is just very, very interesting. And so let's going back here, what kind of mind frame he is. Verse 17, it says that he told Delilah all her heart. It talks about never having a razor come upon his head, for he's been a Nazarite unto God from his mother's womb. And if I have all my hair cut off, I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I will become as weak like any other man. And then verse 18 is, we're going to stop at this verse today because there's just so much in it and we're going to run out of time. But Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. Think about those words a little bit. How did she know that? What was going on? What was his facial expression? How was she convinced? How did this stand out from all the others? Why didn't his hair stand out? Did everybody have, scraggly long hair back then? We don't get that impression looking at hieroglyphics and relief pictures that are carved in stone that we see in museums and see in a lot of biblical archaeology magazines, that it wasn't normal for everyone just to go around with long, unkept hair. But there were obviously some people that did. And so for some reason, Samson's hair was not noticeable, that, this drew attention to where his source of strength came from. But after he told it to her, it must have all just resonated with her, and she knew that this was really the truth of the matter. Because in verse 18, she calls for the princes of the Philistines and saying, "Come at once, for he showed me all his heart." and she was convinced enough that this was for real that they paid her up front. They brought the money, which they hadn't done any other time before. And so the Philistines were convinced, she was convinced, and now is where things really go downhill for Samson. So we're going to stop at verse 18. We'll pick up with verse 19 next week and see what happens as she does her dirty work and causes his destruction. So I hope you're enjoying this. Hope it wasn't too much of the Hebrew and things like that. But just want to give you a chance to see how beautiful this is that God has given us this language that we can study, and there's no reaching the bottom of it. There's no um, limit to the depth of the study that we can do, in so much that you can take every word that's in there and break it apart by the letter and look at the built-in commentary that exists in these letters and derive a deeper understanding about how God was trying to relate to us and how he was trying to share his heart with us. And that's really what it's all about. So God bless you all. Have a wonderful week and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.